Okay, I do have a little more verbiage to give you first, and then we'll get down to work and find out how to build these things and what they're made of, in reverse order, actually. I had some criteria for self-concept, and I had some when I began the modeling project, because this essentially is a modeling project. I was trying to figure out, well, what is this thing called self-concept? It's a word, it's a generalization, it's an abstraction, it's a nominalization. It really should be self-concepting. It's what we're doing all the time. It's not a thing. You can't put it in the wheelbarrow. It's a process, or set of processes, really. Anyway, I decided I wanted if I were going to start from scratch, and I don't know how to do this yet, but still, I want to have some criteria for how I would do this, or what I want to have at the end of it, really. Not so much how I do it. I have to figure that out. I want it to be durable. Have you all had the experience of you're bopping through life and everything's pretty good and you're feeling pretty good about yourself, and then somebody insults you or a project falls through, and or you realize you just really made a very, very stupid mistake, and you just go, oh God, and you kind of crash? Is there anyone not had that experience? No, we've all had that experience. If our self-concept was really durable, you'd be able to just sail through something like that. It would last. It would have that carrying through ability. And if you think about it, there are many other experiences in life where that is the case for you. You make a mistake and you go, oh, made a mistake, and you just sail on through. It's not a disaster. But there are plenty of people out there in the world, particularly those who don't come to seminars, for whom this is a major problem. That the slightest little insult or the slightest little quote, failure quote, can just send them into a tailspin, and they go into a depression. They may not come out for another 6 months or something like that. So I want a self-concept to be durable. I also want it to be accurate. Someone says they're a kind person. I'd like to be able to rely on that and assume that in most circumstances they'll be kind. If they're a good mathematician, then they're working for my bank, I'd like to know that they can actually do that they can actually add up the numbers and give me the right number at the end of the month, or a little more. That'd be all right. So I'd like it to be accurate. There are plenty of people around the world, you can probably seen a few of yourself, where they think they're wonderful and the rest of the world doesn't necessarily agree. Or they think they're very capable, and when it comes right down to it, they can't actually do what it is they think they can do. Now, given how we change, the world changes, things change all the time. If we're going to have durable and accurate, it has to be self-correcting as well. You have to have feedback mechanisms so that you know that now you can do things that you couldn't do as a small child. It needs to be accurate. And there are 4 ways, there are essentially 4 possibilities, which I've diagrammed over here. I want to go over very quickly. For instance, if you have high competence, you can actually do a lot of stuff, or let's say a particular thing, and you have high confidence, then everything's great. You can go into a new situation knowing that you can accomplish good things. You can actually do that, and that makes you feel even more competent and more confident about your competence. So that's great. Now, and that's accurate, right? Now, the second possibility is also accurate. If you have low competence and low confidence, at least you won't take on things that you know you can't do. I'm not going to try and be an NBA star, especially at my age. There are many, many other things that I'm just not going to take on because I know I'm not good at those. I've joked sometimes that I'm going to start a new career as a fashion model. Well, I don't think so. That's not something I'm going to be very good at, and so I'm very low confidence about doing that. And that's fine, that's cool, I don't have to do that. Now, if someone has high competence but low confidence, this is what's often called an underachiever in school. They're capable of much more than they're exhibiting. And this is a situation where you can access feelings of confidence and anchor those in, and suddenly the person will just go off and do all sorts of wonderful things because they have the competence already, the skills, the actual behavioral skills. The bottom one is the one that really worries me. There are people in this world who are not very competent at certain things. That doesn't mean they couldn't become competent, but at least at this moment, I can't fly an airplane. I know I can't fly an airplane. I've sometimes imagined what would I do if somehow the pilots keeled over in the cockpit and I was the only guy around who could try and bring a plane down, and I'm sure I would bring it down like that. I don't think I'd be very good at that. But if I had high confidence about it, I would try to do a lot of things that I can't actually do. And many people are injured. Many people injure themselves. This is called, what is it? Cleansing the gene pool, sometimes. The Darwin Awards, yeah. These people who do really incredibly dumb things. Well, I've done some dumb things too. But anyway, in this situation, I would much rather that the person had low confidence. That they don't think, oh yeah, I can perform an appendectomy, no problem. That worries me. So I want it to be accurate. Self-correcting. I want there to be feedback mechanisms, and it turns out actually there are a number of feedback mechanisms that are inherent in a self-concept that works well, so that there's continual revaluation. That if you are kind, if you think of yourself as kind and you do something that's mean, you'll notice it, because it conflicts with the self-concept. You'll tend to notice it because of the very mechanism that's in there. Anyway, there are a number of other things that we can do to make sure that that self-correction is in there, and that's an important part. So we're over here now, actually. Now, I also want the self-concept to be unconscious. I've seen too many people who are pompous and proud, and though pride is listed as one of the 7 deadly sins, a lot of people don't seem to get it. This was true in the Greeks 2,000 years ago. They said pride was one of the principal sins, and one of the sins that then had subsequent sins, so to speak, or subsidiary sins. And if you think about it, if I walked over to the door here, and then I turned to you and smiled and said, I can open the door, wouldn't that seem a bit weird? Why would I do that? Now, maybe if I'd never seen doors before, or I was a small child and I just learned to open a door, maybe that would be appropriate. Oh, new accomplishment. But think about it. It's based on a very small evidence. It means that I'm really not sure of my competence yet. I've just discovered it, and I'm really ambiguous about it. And it turns out that pride is always accompanied by its opposite, shame, that is essentially a sign of ambiguous self-concept. If you really know who you are, then you are who you are, and you take it for granted. Well, sure, I can open the door. What are you asking about that for? I don't understand. Now, boy, excuse me, I'm really messing up the tape here. Now, I assume that you all have experienced being self-conscious. Have you all experienced that? Is it fun? Is it fun being self-conscious? Oh gosh, how am I doing? No, it's not much fun. Is it fun being around somebody else who's self-unconscious, who's self-conscious? No, you're kind of in pain for them because they're in such pain. Now, in contrast, if you can think of some kind of peak performance situation, or what's called a flow state, where whatever you're doing, everything is going smoothly, you're responding to the cues, you're moving, you're doing, you're talking, whether it's sports or good psychotherapy or just a good conversation, you're really hitting it off with somebody, that's essentially totally unconscious. You may be vaguely aware, oh, everything's going well. But what if you actually say to yourself, everything's going well? What happens to your performance? Usually it takes a nosedive. Because as my understanding of a peak performance or a flow state is that all of your available attention, your 7 plus or minus 2, or sometimes 2 plus or minus 2, is attending to what you need to attend to do the job, to get your outcome or get somebody else's outcome or whatever it is. And that if any of that is distracted by evaluation of, gosh, I'm doing really well, that reduces the amount of attention that you have for the actual activity. So I want your self-concept to be unconscious, except when we find out it's not working very well. We might take it out of unconsciousness into consciousness, play with it a little bit, adjust it, and then let it go back into unconsciousness. So I would take a conscious self-concept as being a sign that something wasn't quite right. I want it to be unconscious. I want it to be as unconscious as your name. Now, as soon as I say your name, or if I ask you for your name, you can get it, right? I hope. But until I ask for it, it's unconscious. And that's how I want your self-concept to be. That if someone says, well, can I trust you? You can go in and you can come back and say, yeah, I'm a trustworthy person, or whatever. Or maybe, no, you better not trust me, especially what I'm telling you now. So I want it to be unconscious. And I want it to connect with people. A lot of people have a self-concept, and these are all aspects of the same functioning. I'm just talking about them in different words. Sort of like, you know, a felt tip pen. It's round, and it's long, and it's red. And those are all different aspects of the same object. Well, likewise, these are all different aspects of the same thing that I'm trying to describe here. Language, unfortunately, is linear. And so it kind of goes one at a time. But all of these are happening at once. Some people have a self-concept that separates them from other people. I'm special and you're not. I'm white, you're black, or I'm black, you're white, or I'm woman, you're man. You know, any number of distinctions you can make. Boy. And that inevitably separates you from part of the human race or part of the rest of our surroundings on the planet. And this has to do, again, with self-importance. If you're important, if you're self-important and conscious about it and so on, it just gets in the way. I'm important and you're not, basically. There are two aspects of this. One is, well, if I know I'm a kind person, that doesn't mean anybody else has to be unkind. But if I go, I'm a prince, then it presupposes that somebody else ain't a prince. So some words are words that presuppose that there's some kind of division like that. The other way to do this is to put in a comparison. One is an implicit comparison, presupposed comparison. The other is an explicit one where it goes, I'm smarter than most people, or I'm better than most people, blah, 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 in some way. So building in comparisons to the self-concept is not necessary, and when it does, it will tend to create this connection, separation, and a self-importance, which is part of the whole separation thing. And that's just a drag. I didn't want to do anything that would assist in building separation and self-importance. So these are some of the criteria that I have, and I encourage you to adopt them. If you're not convinced, let me know, and we'll talk about it, or you can do what you want. But these are criteria that I have for building a self-concept that works well. Any questions about these?
I wondered why you put the red surface at the bottom.
Well, it's the not self-importance. These are all things that I want them to connect and be unconscious and self-correcting and so on. But this is something I want it not to be. And I don't have a convenient way of saying not self-important. It's a little bit like going around your elbow to get to your thumb, but it's the best I've been able to do so far. Say, point at this and say, let's not do this one. Let's not do that. It's just a drag for all concerned. And becomes the basis for all sorts of discrimination, economic and racial and you name it. And a lot of the problems of the world can be traced to self-importance. Carlos Castaneda was particularly eloquent on the whole notion of self-importance and not being self-important. It's just a drag for everybody concerned and has a lot of harmful consequences. Okay, well, now let's get into the nitty-gritty of how we do this. Now, normally, what I've been usually structuring this seminar in the book on, which is derived from the seminar and vice versa, is learning about yourself first. There are a lot of NLP trainings, you learn how to do something with someone else, how to do an intervention with someone else. And hopefully, then eventually you take turns and someone else does it with you. But I think I want to do it a little different this way, partly because I'm getting a little bored with how I've been teaching it, and partly just try out different things and stuff. So I think I'd like to demonstrate this a little bit. How many of you have not been to this seminar before? I'd like to. Okay, you 5 and you 2. Okay, great. In the early demonstrations, I'll ask one of you rather than somebody who's already been through this. And what I'd like to do is the following. I would like to demonstrate how to elicit the structure of a positive quality. So I'll ask you to think of some positive quality that you have, that you approve of. So you say it's, you know it's true of you, which means that it's somewhat durable at least, and that you like it, so that it's in concert with your values. I will ask you not to tell me what it is, and simply give me the structure of it. So I'll essentially be using the old time and true question about any nominalization. How do you know that? And we'll explore that and get the structure of it and leave the content behind. You will have content, of course, but I will not have the content. That content just distracts people from process, and so I want to focus on the process of this. So if there's someone who'd be willing to play with me, I want to mention something I often begin seminars with and often forget, and that is that I will interact with you, and at any point this becomes uncomfortable or in any way distressing, if you just make the sign of the cross like this, I will disappear in a puff of smoke and not bother you further. That way I have freedom to play with you and engage in interaction with you and see what we can learn, knowing that you always have that out. You can always go like that, and I go, okay, bye, and stop.
The outcome for this exercise is to learn more about our self-concept.
My outcome is to demonstrate how to elicit the structure of self-concept. In particular, the fundamental structure. I really like to chunk things down into pieces. And in one sense, we could start almost anywhere. In another sense, it's easier to start with the simplest kind of cases. And the simplest situation is where you are already sure of something, so it means it's a part of your self-concept that works well and that you like, so that it gives you self-esteem as well. And so we can start with a piece that works well. And I want to demonstrate how to elicit this structure and then put you to work all doing it. Because, you know, if there's only one way to have your self-concept, this could be a real short seminar. I could just tell you the right way, and that would be it. But there's an amazing variety. And out of that amazing variety comes different capacities, different abilities, different proclivities. And they are, like anything else, everything's useful somewhere, isn't it? Somewhere, everything's useful in some context. Oh, every behavior is useful in some context. Every skill is useful in some context. And the corollary, which is not so often mentioned in NLP, is your greatest skill is also your greatest limitation. I'm Mr. Counterexemplar. Somebody makes a statement to me, and I am immediately going to pick it apart and try and find examples that don't fit the generalization that is given to me. And I've found that in personal life, this is not valuable. That if my wife says, I love you, And I go, well, how about yesterday afternoon at 3 o'clock? This is not conducive to a good relationship. So I have learned to keep my mouth shut. I still have to counterexample, but I do it quietly to myself inside. But if you think about it, whatever skill you have is also a limitation, because you will tend to use that skill whether it's appropriate in a particular context or not. An engineer who's great at dissociating and seeing electrical diagrams and stuff like that, this is not so good during sex. Doesn't work there. It doesn't work. So every skill is also a limitation. And of course, with flexibility, you can learn many different skills, and you pick this skill here and this skill there and this skill there and so on. You'd probably think it a bit strange if I made skiing motions up here while I'm teaching you. Well, I love skiing. It's a wonderful skill, although I'm not that great at it, especially now. But it's out of context. It would not be a resource here. Every resource is a resource somewhere and not other places. So what I'd like is someone who'd be willing to play with me, and I will just ask you, well, how do you know that, basically? And I'll ask you a few other questions. But so who would be willing to come play? Well, you're the first one, so why don't you sit here? And I don't have a name for you.
Oh, sorry, I'm Anne.
Anne. Hi, Anne. Okay. Oh, we got another mic. Wonderful. Okay, so there is some quality that you have, and you know that you have it, so you're reasonably sure about this.
Yes.
And you also like it, right?
Yes.
Good. Now, how do you know that you have this quality? Looks like a picture.
I'm just picturing you.
Notice her eyes are going up.
I've exercised, I've behaved out of this quality many times.
Okay, so you have examples of this quality?
Yes.
And are those images?
Yes, there's an image.
Okay.
And there's a feeling.
And they look like they're up here somewhere.
That's right.
How far away?
It's a bit more up there.
Okay, a little to the right.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. And roughly how big are they?
Quite big.
Okay.
About, yeah.
Okay.
Quite big.
And do they come one after another then?
Oh, right now I'm looking at one,
Okay.
because I exercised this yesterday.
Okay. So you're seeing one at the moment.
Seeing one, yeah.
Okay. And, but you mentioned plural, right? You mentioned a number of times.
Yes, many times.
Okay. Now, if you think of many times, how do you think of, what sort of images you have, or what representations do you have of many times?
Many times I can access over here.
Okay, so you've got a bunch over here on your
Yeah.
past timeline. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, it's fine to have them on your past timeline, but I'm assuming that you have these assembled in some way, because on the timeline they're in with all the other things that you do.
Yes, that's right.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, in order to be certain about this and to have a nice, durable, stable sense of who you are in regard to this quality, I'm assuming that you have some way of organizing them separate from the timeline.
Yeah, it's a part of me. It's something I am. I don't know how to
Yeah.
describe it in submodalities.
Okay. Now, the gesturing in here, that's an emotional feeling, right?
Yes.
It's more of a sense of, it's a sense of solidity,
Yes.
or and part of who you are.
Right.
So it's not questionable. It's not just the behavior. It's who you are.
Yes.
And that's great. That's what we want to go for. But that's a result of something I think you're probably
That's
doing
right.
up there.
That's right.
So tell me a little more about what you're doing up there.
It's bright. It's you mean the submodalities of it?
Okay. Yeah. Give me a few submodalities.
Okay. It's bright. It's moving. It's full of
Okay.
action. It's it's exciting.
Uh-huh.
Looking at it produces a good feeling in me.
Uh-huh. That's called self-esteem.
Yeah.
Because
Right.
it fits with your values,
That's
right?
right. That's right.
If you made a picture of something else up there, you wouldn't get the same kind of feeling. Now, I'm curious about how you do the plural, though. That's in particular. You talked about the number of experiences of
Yes.
doing this.
Yeah.
How do you represent a number of experiences somehow all together?
I'm not sure.
Well, what do you have up there right now? You got that? You have a single image still?
I've got yeah, now that I think about it, I've got a single image, and it's sort of representational of the plurality.
Okay, great. Now, this is what I call a summary image, or what's sometimes called a prototype or an exemplar. And in your notes, I haven't used these words. I've used the word summary image, so it might be best to do that. It's like a representation of all the times. Is that right?
Yes, yes.
Good. Now, that's wonderful, and it gives you a quick access to that. So if I ask, are you this kind of person, you can look up there and go, yep.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay? Now, how do you represent all the examples, though? This is, as you said, a representation of the plurality. How do you represent the plurality itself?
Well, that's an interesting question, because until a week ago, my past was over there.
Mm-hmm.
I've moved it over here, so
Okay.
I'm playing with this.
Okay.
And what came up for me now when you asked the question was it's now visible.
Okay. Now,
Yes.
this is a possibility. Now, when you visualize them over here, do they stick up more, or do they
Yes.
are they
Yeah.
glowing, or
Yeah, there's
how can you collect just those experiences of this quality and kind of leave behind all the other experiences in your life?
okay. They're higher.
Okay.
They stand up higher than the others. Like
Okay.
if
Now,
it's-
let's
if-
try a little experiment.
Okay.
Keep an eye on your timeline,
Okay.
and now think of some other quality.
A similar sort of quality?
Could be
Or anything.
Any other quality that you know is true of you. And I want to know if the ones that are up
Okay.
pop down, and if some others pop up, or something like that.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I've got a different coding now.
Okay.
I've got little lights
Okay, great.
for this
Now,
other one.
Given that they're pretty small here, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you know that these are all examples of that? Can you actually see the content in there?
No.
Okay.
No. It's a sense of, and how do I sense it?
Mm-hmm.
It's brighter. It's a
Right.
sense of things
So it
being
has the same brightness
brighter.
as that
It's
image
got
over
it's
there?
got the same qualities as this. I know it's got the same qualities as this,
Okay, the
even
question
though
is-
it's tucked in.
The
Yeah.
question is, how do you know it?
Okay.
Here's the thing. If I wanted
Yeah.
to teach somebody else how to do what you do,
Okay.
which works, right?
Yes.
I would need to know how you know that connection.
Okay. I can see the top of
Okay.
the picture,
Uh-huh.
and I can see it's got the same qualities as this. It's clear. It's bright.
Okay.
And I just need to sort of, I know that I need to go, if I go in there, then it's moving.
Okay. Now you say if you go in there, how would you go about going in there?
I just remember that moment, that time.
And how would you do that?
Okay, what I would do now is it's literally lift that picture up.
Okay.
And I guess, let me try.
Yeah.
I guess I'll move it over here.
I would think so, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, just pop it over there, right?
Just pop it over here, yeah.
And then it
that's
becomes
right.
moving.
Yes.
Okay, great. Wonderful. Okay. And that's how she does her self-concept for this quality. And it works. It's durable. She has a good sense of the solidity. It's in alignment with her values and so on. Let me see if I left anything out here in my little list. Well, I think I know the answer to this already, but when you say it's moving, when it's in here, it's a still, right?
Yeah, it's almost like an archive or a library,
Yeah.
or it's
File
there.
cards.
File, yeah. Well, not exactly cards. They're more like discs,
images.
yeah. Or
Okay.
so you take it out and you
Right.
boot it up here.
Okay, you boot it up there. And when you put it up there, then it's moving, right?
Yes.
Now, I want to ask you, can you step inside this? I know the answer to this already, but
Yes.
yeah, you step inside it right away, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, this is what I would call, here it's a simultaneous database. It's little things. And they come up, they're bright and they glow and they have the particular qualities of the image over there, of the summary image. But as she experiences them sequentially. She has one of those up at a time. In contrast, for instance, some people would have like a collage up there. And instead of having them coded in the timeline and coded in submodalities, they would actually image them over there, as well as having them on the timeline. And so they could be all sorts of different images that would be simultaneous. Okay. Now, do you have any questions about what we've done?
Yeah, it's very interesting. When you mention that, I'm not sure whether or not I ever do that. I don't know. I haven't checked.
Well, you can find out and you can play with trying it out.
Very interesting. From the talk the other night when you talked about putting the frame around it, that's given me the idea of doing that to strengthen it even more.
It's another way of doing it. Sequential works fine and simultaneous works fine, and I'll go into some of the advantages of both. It's one of those things where they both have utility, they both have advantages, and there are ways of putting them together so you get the goodies of both of them.
Could there be a possibility in relation to what you were saying about pride and shame and self-importance that you could make something too strong?
I'll go into that. It's a good question, and it's one that I answered wrongly for a while.
Okay.
So I have particular poignance to that because I had made a mistake years ago, and we'll get into that. Do you have any questions of Anne?
Yes. I just want to ask you, Anne, did you see all your qualities here on your timeline, and that one is a summary of them? What did you see exactly?
I was picking, my understanding of the exercise was that I was to pick one quality. So I picked one quality and I sorted for that. And then what? I sorted for that.
Sorted.
What does that mean?
She sorted through all the stuff she has in her past for the times when she had that quality.
So I had a representation of the quality here, and then, so that was very clear.
That quality, you had it, or you presently have it?
I have it. It's a strong, durable quality that I have.
And you just sorted the experience?
Yeah, I looked through my past and I noticed that all the occasions when that quality was exercised and showed itself up were like these raised files here.
So the little images kind of pop up about halfway, huh? Or
yes.
a third of the way or something like that?
Something like about a third of the way.
About a third, okay.
Do you have to sort in order to know? You can't know it without sorting?
Let me answer this question because I think I can answer it better than she could perhaps.
Please do.
Her way of knowing it instantly is this image up here. That gives her the positive feeling. It's a moving image. She can step into it. She can have the full feelings and the liking of it, the pleasure in it as well. This is what gives her the information. However, this only works because she has this database. That if I were to try to imagine myself doing something that I've never done and I know I can't do or something like that, and I try and make a big bright image of that, it wouldn't work. The database is required. This is what I call a database here. This is a summary of the database. It's like an icon or a representation of all, you said a representation of the plurality or some words like that. And the interesting thing that I found out here is that if you try to deal with this alone, it's too hard because this is a representation of all of these. But if you go inside the database, you can change one of those pictures at a time and end up changing that.
Change it in what way?
Well, I don't want to change this one because she likes it. But let's say that there was some other quality that she didn't like about herself. That this one up here is, boy, I'm such a klutz in social situations, or I'm mean, or I always yell at the kids, or something like that, and I want to change that. If I try to change that summary representation, it's very hard. But if you go into the database, you can change all of those one at a time and end up changing that. And this is very easy to change, and the result is making a change that's otherwise difficult. And I'll go into that in much more detail. But where we'll be working is primarily with the database. This is wonderful. The summary up there is wonderful. It gives you that quick information. So if I say, are you that kind of person? You go, yep. And I wanted to point out earlier, her tone of voice in talking about this. It's very, very quiet. It's got substance. It's not shouting and screaming. It's not like, as one guy described it, it's not like trumpets or anything. It's just, I know this. It's like, and the kind of words that she was using too. It's who I am. It's a part of me. That's what we want. We don't want this stuff where it's straining and struggling and pretending to be something that one is not. This is the kind of tonality. Her tonality tells me, yes, this is what we're talking about. This is what I want. Okay. Do you have any other questions of Anne? And then I'll go on. Go ahead.
Like you picked almost a recent representation of this quality as the summary. Is that true or not?
Yes. What happened for me was when I picked the quality, I allowed my unconscious mind just to pop up the first quality that fitted what was asked for. I went with that. And it so happened that I had an experience of that yesterday evening. So it was like zoom, straight into the picture of yesterday evening.
There are a variety of ways of choosing a summary representation, some of which sometimes it's a kind of an amalgam. It might be a particularly strong example from the past where it was very, very obvious, particularly obvious. It could be a more recent one, or, people have different criteria for choosing either one example from the database or an amalgamation of examples from the database. And all of those work, and they all work in different ways, and they all have advantages and disadvantages. Okay, any other questions of Anne? Okay, great. Thanks a lot.
Oh, you don't need to.
That's all right. I'll just see. I guess you want to take care of it. Otherwise, people will walk on it. Thanks. Okay. Now I want to go through the little list that you have. This would be a good time to look at your notes very briefly, at least. Because I want you all to do this. And oh, I forgot to ask. How many examples do you have in there? How many, roughly? 10, 50, 100, 1,000?
Probably like 100.
A couple hundred. Okay, great.
By themselves? They pops?
They popped up. I had a sense that I could access just about anything that fitted that quality.
It's just a rough number. We don't really know, but it's, if you look out out the window here and you see all those rocks, you could make a rough guesstimate. Well, it might be 1,000 rocks out there, and you don't have to count them one by one. But some people have more, and some people have fewer. So the first task is to do what I did with Anne. Just ask this question over and over again, and I want you to identify how the person has their summary and a little about it. But that's not the main thing. The main thing I want you to find out is the database. How does a person have their database? What systems? Visual, auditory, kinesthetic, or all of those? I didn't ask in detail, but I'd be willing to bet that Anne has an image first, and then when it starts to move, she can get into it and have the feelings of it, and then probably there's auditory as well. Yeah? Sure. So you have all systems. You can associate into it and so on. And notice she had it in a particular location. It was up for her, it's up to the right. Other people would be somewhere else. It could be in the auditory system. It could be a bunch of voices tucked under an ear on one side or the other, or the back of the head, or on the top of the head. It can be anything. See, this is this thing where if everyone did it the same way, it'd be real simple. But people do it in so many different ways, in different systems and so on. And they all have advantages and disadvantages. And if you want to be really respectful of the person, you find out how they do it. And it also gives you the information about how to build a new one. If they want to build a new sense of themselves, you can use, like what I got from Anne here, as a template. And I could build a whole new one there. And I could say, hey, Anne, go through into your past and so on, and pick out examples of this, whatever it is, tenacity or whatever quality you wanted to build, and then I would know exactly how to build it for her. Now that might not work for anybody else in this room, but for her it will work great. And this is part of being able to adapt a general method of how people have self-concept to a particular individual, so that what you do with them fits them very easily. It's very effortless, and it makes it very easy to make changes that otherwise might be quite difficult. You know, for years people have talked about identity change being very difficult. Well, it's been difficult primarily because people have dealt with that summary representation. And if you're dealing with a summary, you're implicitly dealing with all those little ones, but not directly. And so that's part of what makes it really hard. So we'll be focusing mostly on the database. How does a person have a database? Now, there are many, many, many ways. Usually I have you go in and explore on your own so that you're not contaminated by what you saw up here, but I thought it'd be fun to demonstrate. When you have a single image, as Anne did, you could have the other ones sort of behind like this, like a deck of cards that you squished a little bit sideways so that you can see all the edges of the other cards behind, and then you can have a sense of how many examples you have, even though this is the one that you're really paying attention to. So the location, that's obvious, I think. You all know about location and the importance of location. Simultaneous or sequential. Anne was sequential. And her database over here was simultaneous, but she represented it sequentially. That if I would say think of a lot of other examples of times when you had this, she would probably go blink, 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 blink up here. Now you may find out after the seminar you do it differently, but right now this is how you do it. Now other people will have more of a collage. They have a whole bunch of little pictures like this. And you'll see me doing a diagram like this quite often in the seminar because it's something I can point to. You can say, well, here's this image here and this image here and so on. Doesn't mean that it's better, it's only different. All modalities, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, feeling, association. Can you easily step into and associate into any example, and how do you do it? Some people make the image really big and then they can just walk into it. Other times they make themselves small and they step into it that way. There are a lot of different ways of doing all of these things. What submodalities? Often this is brightness, and there's brightness and color and movement and various things like that. Because if you think about that, remember, this is kind of a target. This is what you are and want to be in the future. Not only now, but in the future. Just as in the Swish, you build the future you and then you become it. So it's both now and future. And this is essentially a template for how you want to be. And in here is the information about whatever that quality is. So this is your quality in this context and that time, and this is with another person another time and place, and this is another and another and another, and so on. Different contexts, different people, different so on. We'll go into a lot of those in great detail. But I think that's enough for the initial exercise. And do you have any questions about the exercise?
I have a question,
Okay.
detailed question about the idea of quality, and maybe it's better to ask it after the exercise.
No, let's ask it now.
Okay, it was in the category of beliefs, values, and capabilities.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, for example, of a quality. So, like with kindness, you use kindness. If I were to think of it, I'd say I value kindness, and I'm capable of being kind in certain contexts. That's kind of
Well, I'd want to take something that's a little more universal. If you contextualize it, then it's more of keeping it as a behavior that you can do. But who are you as a person? It's a little different question. And I'm saying that the easiest way to go after this and learn about it is to take the more middle level of capabilities or qualities. Things like, oh gosh, loyalty, tenacity is one of my favorites. I'm motivated. See, a lot of people go for motivation, not realizing that motivation tends to be kind of transitory, whereas tenacity is motivation over time. And a lot of people don't need more motivation, they need more tenacity. They need more ability to carry through with something, not just get excited about it and then get unexcited about it. Steadfastness. Gosh, I've got a long list in the book, and then when I think about them, I can't think. Intelligence.
The reason I asked is you mentioned that there are some projects that you're not tenacious about. So is that, and that's...
Okay. Now, this gets into counterexamples. Every generalization has counterexamples. So even if I think of myself as tenacious, there are counterexamples when I'm not tenacious. For right now, I'm going to ask you to ignore them. They're tremendously important. But just think about how you would describe yourself to someone, maybe particularly over the telephone where you have to use words. What words would you use to describe yourself? What kinds of adjectives or nominalizations would you use?
Even though there are counterexamples, this is the way I think about it.
Yeah. Right now, we'll ignore counterexamples. They're tremendously important. We'll spend a lot of time on them tomorrow. They're crucially important, but for right now, they would complicate things. So just kind of sweep them aside, tuck them under the rug, or, I don't know, put them on a shelf, and we'll get to them tomorrow. Now, Hughes.
Yes, I want to clarify something. When you say the way Anne did it, you mean the way she sorted, I mean, this way or the other way? This is what you think?
Everything that she did up here was one way of having a self-concept. There are many, many ways. And as much as you can, ignore what you saw up here, except as a general idea for how to ask the questions.
No, I just want to know what are you referring to, way of what?
Oh, let me give you some examples. One gentleman I have a video of, his way of knowing that he was intelligent was he had 50 voices under his left ear. He had one general voice, a summary voice said, "I'm smart," and then he had a collection of about 50 voices, all of different people in different contexts, commenting on something that he had just done, which demonstrated intelligence. And his summary, the first voice that came up was his father saying, "I don't know where you got all that intelligence from." Which is wonderful, because it's all presupposed. It's presupposing that he didn't get it from his father. His father was intelligent. He always thought his father was more intelligent than he was. And so it really gave him a buzz when he heard his father say, "I don't know where you got all that intelligence from." You know, what would most parents do? Most parents would say something like, "How did you get to be so stupid?" Right? That's a way to build self-concept, but not a good way. So other people might have a collage, or the collage might be behind their head. You know, just as timelines can vary, how you have your collection. What is common is the selection and the collection. There will be some kind of selection, some kind of collection. There will be a summary and a database. And what I'm asking you to find out is, how do you have your summary? Is it an image, a sound, a feeling, and so on? And if it's a feeling, you need to be careful to distinguish between an emotional feeling, which is the result of something, versus, you know, I could have a feeling of kindness, and it would be something like this. It would be tactile and proprioceptive. That's fine. If I have the feeling, the emotional feeling of what kindness means to me, that's a result of this, or an image, or a voice, or a combination of all of those. So in the kinesthetic system, if somebody says, "Well, I just feel like I'm a kind person," you need to explore a little bit how they do it, because it's likely that they have a summary. They could have a summary of a kinesthetic evaluative, positive, negative, and so on. But that's not really going after the database. So there are many, many. Does that clarify? And in your groups, you'll find out there are many different ways of doing this. And that's part of the value of this, is to find out how many different ways there are, so that when you do this with someone, you know, one-on-one, you can be very respectful of how this person actually does it.
Is self-concept affected by culture?
Of course. Of course. It's affected by culture. It's affected by context, by climate, by all of those factors. And I'm going to dodge that really for now, because what I want to do is go after the structure of it. Once you know the structure, then you can build anything you want, irrespective of culture.
Maybe if it is affected by culture, it won't pops up.
What is it?
If it is get affected by culture, maybe it's so hard. I'm talking about. I'll have to go through the exercise.
Yeah, just do the structure first. All of us are affected by culture. Everyone grows up in some kind of culture. Culture directs your attention to certain things and ignores other things, just like language does the same. Language, we have words for certain things in every language that other languages don't have. Those are all ways of selecting and directing our attention. And this is fundamentally the same thing. Oops. Well, it's learning how do you select and how do you collect, and what do you collect and select. And then out of that, we'll develop what do you pay attention to, and how will you be in the world.
I can clearly see the main image in the sequential organization.
Mm-hmm.
In the collage.
Mm-hmm.
There still is one main image somewhere in there, is there?
Well, there's going to be a summary image somewhere. Or it might be a voice.
Okay.
You find out. That's your job.
Okay.
Find out, what is the summary? And this will be what the person goes to first. If you were using content, are you a kind person? And they go, yes, no, or maybe. And they might look, or they might hear a sound, or they might have a feeling, or whatever. That's going to be the summary. And then you go, how do you know that? And then you go start getting after the database. And as I mentioned, this is relatively unconscious for most people. It's probably becoming conscious as you watched me working with Anne. And as I'm talking about this, it's probably you're getting some glimpses already, so it'll make it easier when you do your little thing. But that's what I want you to find out. So at the end of the exercise, I'd like you to be able to describe whoever it is you elicited, just as I could describe Anne. So she's got, her summary image is up here. It's big and bright. It's about like this. It's a little bit off center. Her database is like this, so these things pop up, blah, 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 all that stuff. You see, if you get into this much detail, you can find out exactly how somebody does something. Then you could teach it to somebody else. If they have a special skill or a special problem, the knowledge of the structure tells you what to do. And that's what I want you to go after. See, a lot of psychologies, the description of the problem doesn't tell you what to do. The classic example is the DSM-4R. Has some 700, 800, 900 pages of descriptions about how people are broken. None of those descriptions tell you what to do to help them be different. The descriptions are totally useless for that. It's all sorts of words, hundreds and hundreds of pages. In NLP, hopefully, our description of a skill or a problem